What if I told you that the absence of friends in your life is not proof of failure, but rather a mirror reflecting something far more complex, something that lives deep within the architecture of your soul? There are people who move through the world quietly, not because they lack warmth or capacity for connection, but because the terrain of their inner life is so vast, so intricate, that most casual encounters feel like standing at the edge of an ocean and being asked to describe it in a single word. You may be one of these people. You may have spent years wondering what is wrong with you, why the friendships that seem to come so easily to others feel like wearing clothes that do not fit, why the laughter in crowded rooms sounds like a language you once knew but have somehow forgotten. And perhaps, in the silent hours when you are alone with yourself, you have felt both the ache of isolation and the strange, undeniable relief of solitude. This is not contradiction. This is the signature of a particular kind of inner life, one that Carl Jung spent decades trying to understand, not as pathology, but as a legitimate and profound way of being human. Jung spoke often about the difference between introversion and extroversion, but not in the shallow way these words are used today. Not as mere preferences for parties or quiet evenings, but as fundamental orientations of psychic energy. For the introvert, energy flows inward. The world is encountered first within the self, filtered through an inner landscape of reflection, imagination, and meaning-making. This is not a choice. It is not something you decided one day because you read a book or had a bad experience. It is the way your consciousness is structured, the way your soul breathes. And when you live this way, when your primary relationship is with the inner world, the outer world of social expectation, of constant availability, of surface-level exchange, can feel not just exhausting, but almost violent in its demands. You are not rejecting people. You are protecting something precious, something that gets damaged when exposed too carelessly to the noise and haste of ordinary social life. There's a particular kind of tiredness that comes from trying to be present in spaces that do not nourish you. You have felt it, I am certain. The fatigue that settles into your bones after an afternoon of small talk. The way your mind begins to wander even as you nod and smile. The sense that you are performing a role rather than inhabiting yourself. And later, when you're alone again, there is that sigh, that deep exhalation, as though you have been holding your breath for hours. This is not misanthropy. This is not coldness. This is the natural response of a psyche that requires depth, that hungers for meaning, that cannot sustain itself on the thin gruel of casual interaction. Jung understood this. He knew that for some people, solitude is not the absence of connection, but the presence of a different kind of connection, one that happens in the quiet, in the space between thoughts, in the slow unfolding of inner work that cannot be rushed or shared easily with others. When you have no friends, or very few, society tends to read this as evidence of something broken. You must be damaged, they think. You must be incapable of intimacy, unable to relate, trapped in some psychological dysfunction that needs fixing. And perhaps you have believed this yourself. Perhaps you have looked at your life and felt shame, felt that you were failing at something fundamental, something that everyone else seems to understand instinctively. But what if the truth is more complicated? What if the absence of friends is not a lack, but a reflection of standards, of thresholds, of an inner selectivity that refuses to settle for connections that do not meet you where you actually live? This is not arrogance. This is not superiority. This is self-knowledge, even if it comes at a cost. You know, perhaps more clearly than most, that not all connection is nourishing, that some relationships drain more than they give, that the loneliness of being misunderstood in company is often more painful than the loneliness of being alone. Jung wrote about the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the social world, the version of ourselves we present to meet the expectations of others. For most people, the persona is a useful tool, a way of smoothing interactions, of fitting into the roles that society provides. But for those who live primarily in the inner world, the persona can become a burden, a costume that never quite fits, a performance that exhausts rather than energizes. And when you spend too much time wearing the mask, when you invest too much energy in being what others expect, you begin to lose contact with the deeper self, the part of you that knows its own truth, that carries its own values, that cannot be reduced to social pleasantries and agreeable opinions. This is the danger that people like you face, not the danger of isolation, but the danger of self-betrayal, of sacrificing inner coherence for outer acceptance. And so, perhaps unconsciously, you withdraw, you pull back, you choose solitude, not because you hate people, but because you love yourself enough not to abandon who you are for the comfort of belonging. There is a particular kind of person who cannot tolerate superficiality. You may be this person. You sit in conversations and feel a restlessness, a sense that the words being exchanged are merely filling space, that nothing real is being touched, that everyone is circling around the surface of things without ever diving below. And you wonder if you're the problem, if you're too serious, too intense, too demanding. But the truth is that your psyche is oriented toward depth, toward the archetypal, toward the questions that do not have easy answers. You want to talk about what it means to be alive, about the strange fact of consciousness, about the patterns that repeat in your life, about the dreams that haunt you, about the ways we lie to ourselves and the moments when truth breaks through. And these are not conversations that happen easily. They require trust, vulnerability, time, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. Most people are not prepared for this. Most people have built their lives around avoiding exactly these kinds of encounters. And so you find yourself alone, not because you are incapable of friendship, but because true friendship, the kind that meets you in your depth, is rare. Jung spoke of the unconscious, that vast realm of psyche that lies beneath the surface of awareness, the place where symbols and dreams and forgotten memories reside, where the archetypes move like great currents beneath the visible world. For most people, the unconscious remains largely unexamined, a background hum that influences behavior but never becomes conscious. But for some, the unconscious exerts a powerful pull, a gravitational force that draws attention inward, that demands exploration, that will not be ignored. You may be one of these people. You may have always felt that there is something beneath the surface of your life, something that wants to be known, something that speaks in dreams and sudden insights and moments of strange recognition. And this inner work, this dialogue with the unconscious, is solitary by nature. It cannot be outsourced. It cannot be done in groups. It requires silence, patience, and a willingness to face what you find there, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it contradicts the story you have been telling yourself about who you are. The world tells you that happiness is found in connection, in community, in being surrounded by people who love you. And this is true for many, but it is not the whole truth. There is another kind of happiness, quieter, less visible, that comes from living in alignment with your own nature, from honoring the rhythms of your own psyche, from refusing to betray yourself for the sake of fitting in. This happiness does not announce itself. It does not look impressive from the outside. It is the satisfaction of knowing that you are living honestly, that you are not pretending, that you are meeting yourself with compassion and curiosity rather than judgment and shame. And this kind of happiness often requires solitude, requires space away from the expectations and projections of others, requires time to simply be with yourself without apology or explanation. When you have no friends, people often assume you're cold. They see your reserve and interpret it as rejection. They see your silence and read it as judgment. They see your withdrawal and conclude that you think yourself better than them. But this is projection. This is the discomfort that depth provokes in those who have not done their own inner work, who have not questioned the assumptions they inherited, who have built their identity on external validation and social approval. Your presence, your refusal to play the game, your insistence on authenticity threatens the structures they have built to avoid looking inward. And so they label you arrogant, weird, broken, difficult. These labels say more about them than about you. They reveal the fragility of a worldview that cannot accommodate difference, that cannot tolerate someone who has chosen a different path, who has prioritized inner coherence over outer conformity. Jung believed that the process of individuation, of becoming who you truly are, is the central task of the second half of life. But for some, this process begins much earlier. For some, the question of identity, of authenticity, of what it means to live truthfully, is present from the beginning, a pressure that shapes every choice, every relationship, every moment of solitude. You may have felt this pressure. You may have always known, in some inchoate way, that you are here to do something more than simply repeat the patterns you were given, that you are here to discover something, to become something that requires going against the grain, that requires saying no to what everyone else says yes to. And this is lonely. There is no way around that. The path of individuation is not a group activity. It is not something you can do with the encouragement and approval of others. It is something you must choose again and again, in the face of misunderstanding, in the face of isolation, in the face of your own doubt and fear. There are moments when the loneliness feels unbearable. You sit in your room and wonder if you have made a terrible mistake, if you have sacrificed connection for a phantom, if the inner life you have been cultivating is just an elaborate excuse for cowardice, for an inability to meet the world on its terms. And in these moments, it is important to remember that doubt is part of the process. The path you are walking does not come with guarantees. It does not offer the reassurance of consensus. It asks you to trust something that cannot be proven, to believe in the value of your own experience, even when no one else validates it. This is the test. Not whether you can avoid loneliness, but whether you can endure it without abandoning yourself. Whether you can hold steady in the face of uncertainty. Whether you can continue to honor your own depth, even when it would be easier to flatten yourself into something more palatable, more acceptable, more easily understood. Jung spoke of the shadow, the part of ourselves that we disown, that we project onto others, that we refuse to acknowledge as our own. For those who have no friends, the shadow often takes the form of the fear that you are, in fact, unlovable, that there is something fundamentally wrong with you, that your solitude is not a choice, but a sentence. And this fear is real. It is painful. It lives in the body, in the tightness of the chest, in the ache of longing, in the tears that come unexpectedly when you see others laughing together, when you watch the ease of their connection and feel your own distance from it. But the shadow must be faced, not denied. You must look at this fear, must sit with it, must ask it what it has to teach you. And often, what you discover is that the fear is not about being unlovable, but about the cost of being yourself, about the grief of knowing that most people will not meet you where you are, that the depth you carry is both a gift and a burden, that the price of authenticity is often isolation. There is a difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is the ache of disconnection, the feeling that you are separated from something you need, that you're missing a vital part of human experience. Aloneness is the state of being with yourself, of inhabiting your own presence, of finding sufficiency in your own company. And the journey from loneliness to aloneness is not a straight line. It is a spiral, a process of returning again and again to the same questions, the same doubts, the same moments of despair and clarity. You learn, slowly, that you can survive without the constant validation of others, that your worth is not determined by how many people want to be near you, that the richness of your inner life is real even if no one else sees it. This is not resignation. This is not giving up on connection. This is a deepening, a maturation, a a shift from seeking yourself in the eyes of others to finding yourself in the silence of your own being. Jung believed that the psyche is self-regulating, that it moves toward wholeness, that even the most painful experiences serve the process of individuation if we are willing to engage with them consciously. Your lack of friends, your solitude, your sense of being different, these are not obstacles to your development. They are the material of your development. They are the crucible in which you are being refined, the pressure that is shaping you into something more true, more real, more aligned with your own nature. This does not mean the pain is not real. It does not mean you should not long for connection, should not grieve the friendships you do not have, should not feel the ache of being misunderstood. But it does mean that your suffering is not meaningless, that it is part of a larger process, that you're not being punished but being invited into a deeper relationship with yourself. There is a particular kind of strength that comes from walking alone, not the strength of the hero, loud and visible, but the strength of the pilgrim, quiet and enduring. You have had to learn to trust yourself, to rely on your own judgment, to find your own way without the constant feedback and reassurance that others take for granted. And this has made you resilient in ways that are not immediately obvious. You have learned to sit with discomfort, to tolerate uncertainty, to hold complexity without needing to resolve it prematurely. You have learned that you can survive your own company, that you are not as fragile as you feared, that the inner life you have been cultivating is a source of strength, not weakness. This is not something you can put on a resume. This is not something that impresses at parties. But it is real. It is valuable. It is the foundation upon which a genuine life can be built. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also knew that this privilege comes with a cost, that becoming yourself often means disappointing others, means refusing the roles they have assigned you, means standing apart from the crowd, even when every fiber of your being longs to belong. You have paid this cost. You have chosen, consciously or unconsciously, to honor your own truth even when it isolated you, even when it made you the object of misunderstanding, even when it left you sitting alone wondering if you made the right choice. And the answer is not simple. There is no objective right choice. There is only the choice that aligns with your own nature, the choice that allows you to sleep at night knowing that you have not betrayed yourself, that you have not sacrificed your integrity for comfort, that you have lived as honestly as you know how. The inner life is not a consolation prize. It is not what you settle for when you cannot have real connection. It is a domain of experience as real and as rich as the outer world, a place where meaning is made, where symbols speak, where the soul encounters itself and the larger patterns that move through all of human experience. When you spend time in this inner world, when you pay attention to your dreams, your intuitions, your sudden flashes of insight, you are not escaping life. You are engaging with a dimension of life that most people ignore, that most people are too busy or too frightened to explore. And this engagement changes you. It deepens you. It gives you access to resources that are not available to those who live only on the surface, who never question, who never turn inward, who never ask the hard questions about who they are and what they're doing here. There are people who will never understand you. This is not a failure on your part. It is not evidence that you need to change, to be more outgoing, to try harder, to lower your standards, to accept connection on terms that do not honor your depth. Some people are simply not capable of meeting you where you are. Their consciousness is organized differently. Their values are different. Their tolerance for complexity and ambiguity is different. And this is not a judgment. It is simply a fact. Not everyone is meant to be your friend. Not everyone is equipped to handle the intensity of your inner life, the seriousness with which you approach existence, the questions you cannot stop asking. And trying to force connection with people who cannot meet you is a form of self-violence, a betrayal of your own nature, a sacrifice that will leave you feeling more alone than if you had simply honored your solitude from the beginning. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, the shared substrate of human experience, the archetypal patterns that repeat across cultures and centuries, the deep structures that shape how we dream, how we tell stories, how we make meaning. When you engage with your own unconscious, when you pay attention to the symbols and images that arise in your dreams and fantasies, you are not just exploring your personal psyche. You are touching something universal, something that connects you to all of humanity, to the great themes of death and rebirth, of loss and transformation, of the search for meaning in a world that often seems meaningless. This is connection of a different order, not the connection of shared interests and pleasant conversation, but the connection of shared depth, of shared struggle, of shared participation in the great mystery of being human. And this connection is available to you even when you have no friends, even when you are completely alone, because it lives within you, in the depths of your own psyche, waiting to be discovered. The question is not whether you're broken, but whether you're willing to trust your own experience, to believe that the way you're made is valid, that the path you're walking is real, that the solitude you inhabit is not a prison, but a sanctuary. This trust does not come easily. It is built slowly, through repeated acts of self-honoring, through choosing again and again to listen to your own inner voice rather than the voices that tell you who you should be, how you should live, what you should want. And there will be setbacks. There will be days when the loneliness overwhelms you, when you doubt everything, when you wonder if you are simply fooling yourself, if the inner life you have been cultivating is just an elaborate defense against the pain of rejection. But these doubts are part of the process. They are the friction that polishes you, the resistance that strengthens you, the darkness that makes the light visible. Jung believed that the second half of life is about integration, about bringing together the parts of yourself that you have split off, about reclaiming the shadow, about making conscious what has been unconscious, about becoming whole. But for those who have walked the path of solitude, who have had no choice but to turn inward, this integration often begins earlier. You have already been doing this work, perhaps without knowing it, perhaps without calling it by any name. You have been sitting with your own complexity, your own contradictions, your own darkness. You have been learning to hold all of it, the longing and the relief, the pain and the peace, the desire for connection and the need for solitude. And this capacity to hold paradox, to tolerate ambiguity, to live with questions that have no answers. This is the mark of psychological maturity, of spiritual depth, of a life lived consciously rather than reactively. There's a particular kind of person who reads philosophy at 3 a.m, who listens to music that makes them cry, who walks alone in nature and feels more connected to the trees than to most people, who writes in journals that no one will ever read, who thinks deeply about the meaning of their life, who cannot stop asking why. You may be this person, and the world does not know what to do with you. You do not fit into the categories. You do not follow the script. You do not want what everyone else wants, or at least not in the same way, not with the same urgency, not at the cost of your own soul. And so you are left on the margins, looking in, feeling both the ache of exclusion and the strange freedom of not having to pretend, not having to perform, not having to be anything other than what you are. The absence of friends reveals your inner level not because it shows you are incapable of connection, but because it shows you have standards, thresholds, requirements that most people do not meet. You cannot be friends with someone who does not value depth, who is not willing to be vulnerable, who is not interested in the questions that keep you awake at night. And these people are rare. Genuine connection is rare. The kind of friendship that nourishes rather than drains, that challenges rather than comforts, that meets you in your complexity rather than asking you to simplify yourself. This is not something you find easily. And so you wait. You live your life. You do your inner work. You trust that the right connections will come when they come, and that in the meantime, your solitude is not emptiness but fullness, Not absence, but presence. Not failure, but fidelity to your own truth. Jung wrote that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you, or from holding certain views which others find inadmissible. This is the loneliness, not the loneliness of an empty room, but the loneliness of being surrounded by people who do not understand you, who cannot hear what you're trying to say, who look at you with confusion or discomfort when you speak from your depth. And this loneliness is more painful than solitude because it carries the added weight of disconnection in the midst of connection, of being seen but not recognized, of being heard but not understood. And so you withdraw, not out of hatred for others, but out of self-preservation, out of a need to protect the tender, vulnerable core of who you are from the casual violence of misunderstanding. There is no resolution to this, no moment when everything suddenly makes sense, when the loneliness disappears, when you're finally understood and accepted and celebrated for who you are. Life is not a story with a neat ending. It is a process, ongoing, unfolding, full of contradictions and complexities that cannot be resolved. But what you can find, what is available to you even now, is a kind of peace with the process, a willingness to accept that your path is different, that your life will not look like other people's lives, that the richness you seek is found inward rather than outward, and that this is not a lesser way of being human, but simply a different way, equally valid, equally valuable, equally deserving of respect and honor. The inner level that your lack of friends reveals is not a level of dysfunction or failure, but a level of depth, of seriousness, of commitment to living truthfully. You have not settled. You have not compromised. You have not betrayed yourself for the comfort of belonging. And this has cost you. It has cost you friendships, social ease, the feeling of being part of something larger than yourself. But it has also given you something that cannot be taken away, something that lives in the quiet center of your being, something that knows its own worth even when the world does not see it. This is the gift of solitude, the fruit of the inner work you have been doing, the treasure that is hidden in the darkness of your own psyche, waiting to be claimed, waiting to be honored, waiting to be lived. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are not less than those who move through the world with ease and confidence and 100 friends who like their photos and laugh at their jokes. You are different. You are oriented toward depth. You are engaged in a process that most people avoid, that most people are too frightened or too busy to undertake. And this process is lonely. It is hard. It asks everything of you. But it is also the path to becoming who you truly are, to living with integrity, to finding the kind of meaning that does not depend on external validation, that does not collapse when the crowd disappears, that remains steady even in the darkest night of the soul. Jung believed that the individuation process, the journey toward wholeness, is not about perfection, but about integration, about bringing together all the parts of yourself, the light and the shadow, the conscious and the unconscious, the persona and the true self. And this integration cannot happen in the noise and distraction of constant social engagement. It requires silence. It requires solitude. It requires time alone with yourself, time to listen to the quiet voice that speaks from the depths, time to pay attention to the dreams and symbols and sudden insights that arise when you stop trying to be what others expect and simply allow yourself to be. This is the work you've been doing, whether you named it or not, whether you intended it or not. And this work is valuable. It is real. It is the foundation of a life lived consciously, a life lived truthfully, a life lived in alignment with your own nature rather than in reaction to the expectations of others. The world will not applaud you for this work. There is no prize for choosing depth over breadth, for honoring your own truth over social approval, for walking alone rather than joining the crowd. But the reward is internal. It is the quiet satisfaction of knowing that you have lived honestly, that you have not betrayed yourself, that you have honored the call of your own soul, even when it led you into the wilderness, even when it left you standing alone, even when it cost you everything you thought you wanted. This is the meaning of having no friends, or few friends, or only the friends who can truly meet you in your depth. It is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of fidelity, of commitment, of a life lived from the inside out rather than the outside in. And so, if you're listening to this and recognizing yourself, if you're feeling the resonance of these words in your own experience, I want you to know that you're not alone in your aloneness. There are others who walk this path, others who understand the particular kind of loneliness that comes from living deeply in a world that values surface, others who know the relief of solitude after the exhaustion of pretending. You are part of a lineage, a tradition, a way of being human that stretches back through history, through all the mystics and philosophers and artists and seekers who chose the inner path, who trusted their own experience, who refused to settle for less than truth. And this lineage does not require you to join anything, to believe anything, to do anything other than continue the work you're already doing, the work of becoming yourself, the work of living honestly, the work of honoring the depth that you carry. Nothing's wrong with you. Your solitude is not evidence of deficiency. Your lack of friends is not proof that you are unlovable. It is simply a reflection of who you are, of the standards you hold, of the depth you require, of the path you are walking. And this path is valid. It is real. It is worthy of respect, of honor, of your own compassion and patience. You do not need a change. You do not need to fix yourself. You need only to continue, to trust, to hold steady in the face of doubt and loneliness and the voices that tell you that you are doing it wrong. You are not doing it wrong. You are doing it differently. And that difference, that willingness to walk your own path, that commitment to your own truth, is not a weakness. It is your strength. It is your gift. It is the signature of your soul.